Amazing moment. Elderly black woman surprises cops by calling her son, the U.S. Attorney General. Mabel's heart raced as she gripped the phone, her fingers trembling over the keypad. In the small town where she had spent her entire life, a storm was brewing, one that felt personal and all too familiar. The neighborhood she cherished had been shaken by a series of petty crimes, and with every report of a young man stopped for simply walking home, her heart ached for the boys who reminded her of her late husband. The police, once seen as protectors, now cast a shadow of suspicion over the very streets where her children played. Could she truly bridge this chasm, or had she become an unwitting pawn in a game far larger than herself? In her modest home, the walls echoed with laughter from countless family dinners, but now, the laughter had quieted and given way to whispers of mistrust and concern. Mabel had always maintained a fierce respect for authority. Her upbringing taught her that the law was meant to protect the innocent. Yet, here she was, grappling with conflicting emotions. Every time she saw young Malcolm, the boy who used to run to her for cookies, his eyes now filled with worry as he faced the police, her heart sank deeper into despair. How had her community come to this? The weight of her decision loomed, like storm clouds gathering on the horizon. Should she call her son? The U.S. Attorney General, no less her son, raised in love yet thrust into the complications of politics and justice. It felt like a betrayal to even consider invoking his name to influence the very forces she had respected all her life. Would they see him as an ally or an imposing figure, stirring more division in a town already trembling at the seams? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As the phone rang, an unbearable tension settled like dust in the air. Mabel wrestled with anguish. Would her plea create more rifts than it would heal? A part of her longed for the warmth and tradition of family dinners, yet another part recognized the harsh truth of a growing divide in her own backyard. She could already picture her neighbors staring, mouths agape at the news that the Attorney General was on his way. Would they view her as a traitor or a beacon of hope? When she finally heard her son's voice on the other end, warm yet authoritative, Mabel's breath hitched. "Mom, what's going on?" he asked, sensing the urgency in her voice. In that moment, she realized that the call she made wasn't just about her. It was a question of identity and legacy. She stood at a threshold, struggling to reconcile the love for her son and the protection of her community. Would her decision bring understanding, or would it plunge their lives into chaos? Facing the window, she saw the clouds darken. Mabel took a deep breath, her resolve hardening. In confronting the complications of authority, she felt both hope and terror swell within her. In her heart, she knew the stakes had never been higher, and she was about to step into an unknown that could alter the very fabric of her life and the lives of those she held dear. What would happen when her son arrived? Would he be their savior, or just another source of division? The weight of uncertainty hung heavily as she braced herself for what was to come. The world she'd known was on the precipice of change. Mabel's heart hammered in her chest as she awaited her son's arrival. She glanced at the clock, a constant reminder of her decision to act. Each tick resonated with the potential consequences of her call, each second a whispered reminder of her responsibility to both her family and her community. She moved through her living room, her eyes flitting over the photographs lining the walls. Each framed moment held stories of joy, pain, and resilience. But at that moment, they felt like ghosts of a past that no longer aligned with the present realities she faced. Her gaze landed on a picture of her late husband, his warm smile a stark contrast to the uncertainty hanging in the air. She choked back a sob. He had always believed in the power of direct communication, believing in dialogue as the bridge over troubled waters. Would he have supported her decision? As the sound of sirens approached, a different kind of dread washed over her. She imagined the scene unfolding in her front yard, neighbors peering out, children looking up with wide eyes, their innocence intertwining with the palpable tension. Would they view her son as a threat or a protector? And what of the legacy she wished to leave behind? The choices she made today could ripple through generations. A knock broke her reverie, and she felt a surge of anxiety dart through her. Mabel opened the door to find her son, taller than she remembered, dressed in a crisp suit. The epitome of authority. For a moment, vulnerability swept over her. She was acutely aware of how she had raised this man, both fiercely proud and deeply protective. Was he still that little boy who sought her embrace, or had the weight of his position altered him in ways she could not yet comprehend? "Mom," he began, concern etching his brow. "What is going on? You sounded upset." The warmth of his voice was both a comfort and a sharp reminder of the distance that his role had created. "Come in," she whispered, stepping aside to let him enter her sanctuary. She led him to the living room, where the air felt thick with unsaid words. "Mabel, many kids in this town feel like they don't have anyone in their corner anymore," she began, her voice trembling. "And their concern is justified. What will you do when they see you?" He replied with measured calmness. "Mom, I'm not here just to show my badge. I want to understand." Her resolve wavered. Could she trust him to see beyond the title that had not only shaped his identity, but also changed the perception of their family? "They need to know they're safe. I can't have them remember our home as a place of fear." "Then let us do something about it together." His genuine determination pierced her uncertainty, igniting a flicker of hope. With each word, she felt the walls she had built around her heart begin to crumble. Suddenly, the door swung open, revealing two local officers standing solemnly. They appeared neither antagonist nor ally, merely participants in a complex dance that Mabel had now unwittingly orchestrated. Mabel's heart raced. This was the moment she had anticipated with dread and resolve. "Gentlemen," her son acknowledged them, "I think it's time we have a conversation about community trust." Mabel watched as the emotional stakes shifted. Her choice to involve her son had ignited a precarious bridge not just between herself and her community, but also between authority and trust. As they began to outline their intentions, she felt a thrill of purpose budding inside her, a realization that she could be more than just a spectator in this narrative. With every exchange of words, the gravity of the situation pulled her in a new direction. Each voice hers, her son's. The officers carried with it the weight of potential change. The trajectory was now set, but Mabel understood that this was only the beginning. As night fell and shadows crept into her living room, Mabel recognized the dawn of a new reckoning. The past would teach her important lessons, but there was also a future that needed defining. Would she stand as a voice of reason and healing, or would the wave of tension drown her efforts before they truly began? Mabel swallowed hard, the air thick with possibility, and braced herself. Tomorrow would test her resolve like never before. And as she faced that daunting thought, one question loomed larger than the others. What sacrifices would she need to make to ensure that the bridge she was building didn't become a battleground instead? Mabel awoke with the first light of dawn, her heart still thudding in her chest from the events of the previous night. The room was heavy with silence, a stark contrast to the storm of thoughts swirling in her mind. She knew today would be a crucial test, not just for her and her son, but for the vulnerable threads of trust that she had begun to weave amidst fear and uncertainty. As she prepared breakfast, her movements felt almost mechanical. The click of the coffee maker, the sizzle of eggs, each sound amplified in the stillness. She couldn't stop the racing questions. How would the community react? Would her son truly understand the stakes at play? Could she shoulder the responsibility of influencing change? The clatter of the utensils brought her momentarily back to the present. With a deep breath, Mabel reminded herself that every conversation held the potential for progress. It was a small, yet powerful notion that she clung to. As she plated the food, she deliberately chose to focus on what lay ahead, not the shadows of doubt threatening to cloud her resolve. Her son arrived promptly, his demeanor serious but calm. He greeted her with a smile that momentarily eased her tension, but she could see the underlying weight of his role etched on his face. Mabel gestured towards the table, where breakfast awaited. "We'll need our strength," she said, trying to inject levity into the atmosphere. "What is the plan?" he asked between bites, his tone focused. The matter-of-factness helped ground her, and she shifted into a flat-out, singular mission mode. "We must approach the community not with authority, but with vulnerability. They might not see you as my son at first. They may only see the badge, she said, conviction building in her voice. We need to show them you are here because you care, trying to listen rather than dictate. Her son nodded, brow furrowing slightly as he processed her words. You know, I've been assuming that they respect the title alone. But now, I think I understand. That's not how trust works or how relationships are built. A flicker of pride blossomed inside her as she realized the profound insight he was beginning to glean. Yes, his journey as an authority figure might have distanced him from the community, but there in that moment, she saw not just her son but a man willing to challenge preconceptions. After breakfast, they stepped outside, Mabel taking the lead as they walked through the neighborhood, an area vibrant and alive yet tinged with tension. Each house they passed was more than bricks and mortar. They were homes filled with stories and histories, each person encased in their struggles. She could see the faces peering from behind curtains, the palpable mix of curiosity and apprehension. Let us stop here, she said, pointing to an empty park space where children often played, an area that had become neglected in recent months. This feels like a good starting point. Her son took a deep breath, eyes scanning the area. You're right. This space is central to the community's heart. Mabel recognized that he was already shifting from authority to advocate, and it filled her with renewed determination. They approached a small group of individuals standing by a playground. Good morning, Mabel called out, warmth in her tone. She felt her son transform beside her, his posture relaxed a little, tentativeness subsiding. Their conversation began haltingly, but with each exchanged word, the emotional backdrop shifted. They spoke of fears, aspirations, and the pressing needs of the neighborhood. Mabel felt the ripples of community trust begin to liven in the air, a collective yearning to be heard. As her son shared his intentions to foster communication, she noticed a spark of recognition in the faces around her. Perhaps they weren't just here to question authority. Perhaps they were ready to engage. Throughout this exchange, Mabel wrestled with her own emotions. The fear of inadequacy that had loomed over her began to diminish. She was no longer just a mother, not even simply a community member. She was an advocate for change, wielding her personal experience as a bridge. Yet, beneath the surface, a nagging doubt clawed at her. Was this connection enough to combat the historical tensions that had festered until now? With this tension still in the air, she turned to her son, who was deep in conversation. His earnestness reminded her how critical their synergy was to this dialogue. Together, they could reshape the narrative. Together, they could redefine what it meant to communicate and empathize. Suddenly, amid their conversation, a voice called out, "What about the things we're afraid to say?" Mabel felt her stomach twist in knots at the rawness of the question. The moment hung heavy between them, a challenge she hadn't anticipated. As her thoughts raced for an answer, Mabel faced a critical decision. She could either skirt around the edge of discomfort or embrace it head-on. She knew that authenticity was key. Would she be brave enough to step into that vulnerability? The stakes were higher than ever. Her determination could either light the way to resolution or plunge them back into the dark. She opened her mouth to respond. A knot tightened in her chest, the air dense with possibilities. This was her moment to truly embrace the changes they both so desperately sought. Would she rise to the occasion? The next words she spoke could resonate beyond this moment, igniting a new path or sealing their fates in fear. In that instant, Mabel understood that the bridge she was building was far from complete. It demanded not just her voice, but an unflinching confrontation with the truth. Could she brave the depth of her vulnerability to catalyze genuine dialogue for future generations? A glimmer of resolve surged within her as she prepared to reply, fully aware that she was on the brink of something transformative. Mabel inhaled deeply, forcing her heartbeat to steady as she glanced around the makeshift gathering. The faces before her were anxious yet hopeful, each person brimming with unspoken fears and unacknowledged desires. She could feel the heaviness of their collective histories pressing down on the air, shaping the very essence of this moment. The question that hung in the air demanded truth, a truth that could either ignite understanding or incite even greater division. With a surge of determination, she found her voice. What we're afraid to say is what keeps us from coming together. We're scared of the past, of what has been said and what has been done. But if we stay trapped in that fear, we can never move forward. Each word felt like a step onto rough terrain, but she pressed on. I'm scared too. But if we want to change things, we must confront our fears openly. That's the only way to create trust. As Mabel spoke, she noticed her son shift beside her. His eyes sparkled with a mixture of admiration and understanding, and for the first time, she felt they both stood on the same ground. He shifted his stance and leaned in. That's what I want to do, as well: listen, learn, and most importantly, share myself. Not just as your son or an officer, but as someone who wants to connect with all of you. The crowd reacted. A few heads nodded, and murmurs of agreement began to circulate. The initial apprehension slowly peeled away, revealing glimmers of curiosity. Mabel sensed a new energy building, one that wrapped around them like a blanket. Then, a woman stepped forward, her brow furrowed, eyes piercing. I appreciate the rhetoric, but what will you truly do? Words won't fill our empty streets or restore what has been broken. There was steel in her voice, the kind that could cut through pretense. Mabel felt the heat of the challenge ignite a fire within her. She realized that the woman wasn't just speaking for herself. She was voicing the collective hurt, the years of neglect that had pushed them all into their separate corners. You're right, Mabel replied, her voice steady. It's not about what we can say. It's about what we can do together starting today. We need to identify the real issues and tackle them head on. She could see the woman softening, though the caution in her posture barely budged. Mabel pressed on. Let us create a plan, something actionable. I want to hear from you all. What changes do you need? What do you expect from my son? We can't fix everything, but we can start from this moment, right here. Her son's nod seemed stronger now, emboldened by Mabel's transparency. With every passing second, it felt less daunting to step into the fray. As they exchanged ideas, solutions began unraveling amid the conversations. A community garden here, regular meetings there, social events that could bridge gaps and ignite familiarity. Mabel started to notice other voices emerging from the group. People who had been hesitant to share, but now took on the role of leaders. Each person spoke with newfound confidence, their contributions forging a tapestry rich with possibilities. Mabel marveled at the transformation unfolding, feeling her doubts bleed away, replaced with energizing hope. Yet as they spoke, a subtle shift in the wind reminded her that not everyone would welcome this change. Someone would inevitably resist, perhaps challenge their burgeoning alliance. A lurking shadow of anxiety crept back, and had they truly ventured onto sacred ground, risking the very connection they had so painstakingly begun? In the back of her mind, Mabel could feel the underlying question pulsating. Would they turn back into their silent separateness as soon as the conversation ended? Or would this be the foundation upon which to dismantle years of fear? The fear of vulnerability could haunt them, but she had taken the crucial step. Now, it was time for others to decide if they would leap as well. With a newfound sense of purpose, Mabel leaned into her son's space, her voice low but determined. This is just the beginning. Do we have the stamina to endure the storm? That may come. His gaze locked with hers, and she saw the commitment burning within him. Yet, as the discussions grew richer, Mabel felt an unsettling presence behind her. A dark figure appeared in the park's shadows, watching them intently. Her heart seized momentarily. Who would dare to disrupt this fragile moment? It was coming. The confrontation was sooner than she expected, and with it came a wave of uncertainty. Mabel steeled herself. This was not just about the community anymore. It was about personal resilience and the strength to protect this burgeoning connection. She could sense that, inevitably, the true test of their vulnerability was just around the corner. How would she respond to the inevitable challenge that awaited? Mabel's pulse quickened as she peered toward the figure lurking just beyond the reach of the gathering light. The shadow emerged, revealing a familiar face. It was Thomas, a local resident known for his sharp tongue and relentless criticism. The weight of tension shifted palpably in the air. Was he here to challenge them, to remind them of their past failures? Don't you think this is all just talk? He called out, voice sharp but wavering at the edges, betraying a flicker of uncertainty. You act like this is a picnic in the park, but it's not. You don't know the work that's required. Mabel felt the heat of the moment swell within her chest. She understood his anger. It lay deeply rooted in years of disappointment, in promises broken so many times. Yet beneath that, she sensed an opportunity, an opening for connection. What if we invite you into this discussion, Thomas? She replied, voice steady despite the tempest inside her. Your voice matters. What do you think we should do differently? He hesitated, caught off guard by her unexpected invitation. Mario's cooperation felt like an acknowledgement of shared burdens rather than a confrontation. Mabel saw her son's expression shift from surprise to intrigue, clearly driven by the prospect of real dialogue. Thomas took a step forward, brow furrowing as he absorbed the room's energy. What do I think? He folded his arms defensively. What you must realize is that intentions don't mean anything without accountability. Don't tell me you plan to fluff your way through this. We've been soft in our approach for too long. Mabel knew she had to dig deeper. I can't promise you easy solutions or quick fixes, she admitted, feeling the weight of her words. But I'm here today because I believe we can forge a path based on accountability and action. I'm asking for your help, your guidance. This admission seemed to create a moment of vulnerability, and silence washed over the group, allowing them to lean into the gravity of her request. Mabel opened herself to them, recalling her own uncertainties about stepping into this role of leadership. She wanted them to know she was walking the same path, grappling with the same fears. You may not trust me yet, she continued, her voice gaining strength, but you can trust this process. If we want to see change, accountability on all sides is absolutely necessary. Hopeful murmurs rippled through the crowd as Mabel witnessed the atmosphere shift around her, tentative yet promising. Thomas studied her for a moment, as if weighing her sincerity. Then, with a slow nod, he stepped closer. Okay, I'll give you a chance. But remember, words can only go so far. When the time comes, you better stand by what you promise. Relief surged through Mabel. They were taking the first steps toward mutual understanding. This was more than a confrontation. It was a pivot point for her growth and leadership. However, she wasn't naive. Thomas's skepticism was just the beginning. The real test lay ahead, where she would navigate the complexities of their histories while remaining steadfast in her commitment to change. All I ask is for a chance to earn it, she replied, her heart still racing but her resolve now fortified. The conversation began to flow more freely, a ripple effect igniting dialogue among others who hadn't felt empowered until now. As they spoke, Mabel felt the knot of tension within her begin to unravel, replaced by a clarity she believed would guide her actions moving forward. If sensing that something had shifted, the dark figure behind her moved, flickering out of sight. But Mabel couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over. She turned to her son, who bore a contemplative expression, and simply said, "This is going to be harder than we anticipated." But another thought struck her. Wasn't this the very essence of growth? Engaging in the discomfort, embracing the challenge, and transforming it into progress. Yet the question loomed. Would their collective endeavor be enough to hold off the backlash that inevitably awaited? In her chest, Mabel felt the stirrings of a storm brewing, and deep within, she knew that confronting the past was only the beginning. How would they face the consequences of their revelations, and would they have the strength to weather the challenges ahead? Mabel stepped away from the group, her heart still pounding. The exchange with Thomas had unearthed an unsettling confidence within her, a determination forged in the fires of confrontation and vulnerability. But still, doubt coiled itself tightly around her thoughts. As she walked towards the nearby park bench, she cast an eye over to Mario, who was now engaged in animated conversation with some of the others. He seemed at ease, buoyed by the momentum that had surged through the crowd. Yet, Mabel couldn't shake the anxiety in her gut. She shifted on the bench, feeling the cool wood beneath her. Was she really ready for this? To lead? To navigate the complexities of fear and skepticism, the weight of history pressing down on her shoulders? Doubt was familiar territory. In truth, it had been her unwelcome companion for far too long. Mabel ran her fingers over the scratched surface of the bench, recalling the past, the countless times she had shied away from taking risks, the moments she had let opportunities slip away simply because she hadn't believed in herself. But this time was different. She had made a choice to embrace discomfort, to extend her hand to those who might challenge her, like Thomas. The prospect of change was both exhilarating and terrifying. Would her willingness to engage and invite criticism be enough? Mabel leaned back, closing her eyes for a moment, drawing in a deep breath for clarity. She pictured Thomas's face, The skepticism etched in his features transformed slightly as he cautiously accepted her invitation to dialogue. It had taken strength to invite a critic into her process, but doing so also required a deeper understanding of her mission. Flashes of her childhood memories mingled with the present. Her grandmother had once told her that growth often came disguised as hardship. "You can't pluck a flower without pulling on its roots," she would say, her voice carrying a depth of wisdom that echoed in Mabel's mind. Mabel felt something inside her shift, igniting a determination that smoldered just beneath the surface. Opening her eyes, she glanced at the gathering crowd. They weren't just voices waiting to be heard, they were individuals filled with their own stories, their own disappointments and hopes. Mabel's breath hitched as she realized she needed to step beyond her prior understanding of leadership. She would have to not only devise a plan, but also foster an environment where others felt empowered to share, where their insights could catalyze true growth. She stood, her resolve blossoming. For every ounce of doubt that threatened to engulf her, she would craft an energy of accountability fueled by true connection. This was about transformation, not just for herself, but for everyone willing to join her on this journey. As the crowd's energy began to swell, Mabel felt a pang of exhilaration. She approached her son, who had now gathered a small group around him. "What is happening?" she asked, her voice low but inquisitive. "They're talking to me about their experiences," he replied, beaming. "It's amazing, Mom. They really want to be a part of this." A flicker of pride ignited within Mabel. She leaned in, glancing at the faces of those gathered, some eager, some apprehensive. It was clear they fluttered on the precipice of something vital. "Listen," she said, raising her voice slightly to capture their attention. "We're here for real conversations, not just empty words. This can't be just talk. It has to mean something. I need everyone to hold me accountable, just as I will hold each of you." Silence fell over the group as her message sank in. Mabel met their gaze, feeling an unsettling anticipation thrill through her as she opened the door for dialogue, and the air around her cracked with potential. But lurking in the corners of her mind remained the knowledge this was merely the first step. The stakes were rising, and she could sense the impending challenges looming just beyond the horizon. What would it take to sustain this momentum when the critiques inevitably returned? Even with the reality of her fears bubbling beneath the surface, Mabel was ready to confront the next challenge ahead, whatever it might be. What would emerge from their conversations? And would those fragile new connections be enough to withstand the pressures that lay waiting in the dark? Mabel's heart beat like a drum as she studied the faces surrounding her. Each individual brought their own stories, their highs and lows intricately woven into the fabric of their shared experiences. It was in this unity of struggle and aspiration that the magnitude of her commitment began to sink in. No longer merely a figure of authority, Mabel realized she was becoming part of something much larger, a network woven from threads of vulnerability and open communication. Maria, a woman at the forefront of a recent community project, stepped forward. "What are we actually hoping to change, Mabel?" Her voice was steady, probing. The question felt like a tightrope. Mabel had to balance the weight of ambition with the reality of her vision. "We're hoping to connect deeply, to challenge our limits, and push for real improvement," Mabel replied, each word an attempt to crystallize her thoughts. "But first, we need to understand where we're starting from." Mabel noticed the nods of agreement interspersed with skeptical glances. She understood no transformation would happen without depth. Without facing the raw complexities of their histories, as conversations erupted around her, Mabel felt alive, yet the pressure mounted. She contemplated each dialogue, focused on merging their voices into a cohesive narrative. Would she be able to weave differing perspectives into actionable steps? The clock ticked louder in her mind, and she knew time would not wait for her. Mabel formed a plan working groups that would tackle specific challenges identified during these exchanges. Yet, even as the ideas flowed, a shadow of self-doubt crept in. Would people actually open up to her leadership style? Would they actively engage in the collaborative effort she craved? "Mario," she called out to her son, who was with a small group of youth eager to share their thoughts. As he turned to her, she braced herself for what came next. "You might not be aware, but they are looking to you as a leader too. You want to encourage them to voice their stories, but what if your own path is less clear?" Was she unconsciously asking him to emulate her? Or was she seeking validation through him? In that moment, she grasped how her own expectations could skew the authenticity she wanted. She needed to allow space for the imperfections that came with growth. Every journey was not linear. It had its detours and setbacks. "Mom," Mario said as he stepped closer, eyes wide with excitement. "They want to know what we're going to learn from this. They want to know it can really affect change." "Exactly," Mabel said, a surge of energy coursing through her. "Let us share that question with everyone." Taking a deep breath, Mabel returned to the group, facing them with renewed vigor. "Change is not something we dictate. It's something we create together. So, what do you want to learn from each other, and what challenges have you faced that we may confront as a group?" As they began to share, Mabel felt their vulnerabilities merging. With each confession, the barriers between them started to dissolve. The dialogue shifted from fear of failure to a collective understanding of personal struggles, and with it emerged a clarity that invigorated her mission. However, a nagging thought lingered in Mabel's mind, one she tried to shake off. What if her encouragement stirred a hornet's nest of unresolved tensions? What if the uncovering of painful truths derailed their progress instead of propelling it forward? Mabel could feel that moment of hesitation before a leap, pressing against her resolve. Yet there was a flicker of understanding. This unpredictability was perhaps the very essence of growth. She stepped into that discomfort, even as her pulse quickened. Mabel understood she was not just leading them. She was leading herself into a path shrouded by uncertainty. As the conversation swelled, fueled by shared thoughts and experiences, Mabel realized they were all investment players in this uncharted territory, facing risks in hopes of root-level change. Yet, what would they uncover, and could the emerging tensions be channeled into productive outcomes? Amidst the energy of unfolding stories, she felt the stirrings of another challenge on the horizon, just waiting to surface, one she must confront if they were to move forward together. The moment for reflection was approaching, but would it bring clarity or chaos? Mabel shifted her weight, contemplating the moment. The air hung thick with anticipation, an unspoken agreement that something transformative was on the precipice of unfolding. Uncertainty rippled through her mind as she sought to align her vision with this newfound momentum. What if this honesty ignited conflict rather than unity? Could she withstand the repercussions of what she had invited into this space? With each passing minute, her resolve tightened. Mabel felt the weight of responsibility pressing against her chest, constricting but also propelling her forward. She recalled her early days working in community development, the earnest idealism that propelled her to fight for change. But as the years stretched on, the ambitious designs for impact often collided with the harsher realities of systemic issues. Mabel's journey had been riddled with setbacks that had tested her belief in a collaborative path. Yet here she was, immersed in a moment that felt refreshingly authentic. "Let's break into pairs," she suggested to the group, her voice carrying a newfound gravity. "Share something that you've learned from adversity, something that shaped your journey." The shift from collective rhetoric to intimate conversation felt electric, a conspicuous thread of vulnerability weaving through them. As participants mingled, Mabel observed their faces. Some wore expressions of trepidation, while others sparkled with a glimmer of liberation. The emotional energy crackled, fueling her own courage. Mabel found herself drawn to Maria, who stood slightly apart, surveying the dynamics unfolding. Approaching her, Mabel noticed tension shrouded in uncertainty. "Are you okay?" Mabel prompted, a genuine inquiry nestled in her tone. Maria hesitated before her reply emerged, laced with defensive undertones. "I guess I'm just wondering where this is all headed. What if people just share pain? How does that lead to change?" Mabel appreciated the pointed nature of Maria's concern. This was no simple exercise in sharing stories. This was a dance between raw truths and the potential for chaos. "I know it sounds daunting," she replied, her voice steady, "but their stories are wires of connection. If we can bear witness to the pain together, we can build resilience." Mabel felt a small rush of affirmation, recognizing that the very engagement she feared layers of emotional complexity could be the catalyst for transformation. Sensing Maria's skepticism, she decided to share a personal hurdle that had led her here. "I struggled with trusting my voice for years. I feared that digging deep would expose my vulnerabilities, But it was precisely in those moments of reckoning that I found strength. Maria's expression softened slightly, and Mabel sensed an opening. Yet, as a flurry of voices erupted behind them, her focus shifted back to the group. The conversation seemed to swell, some voices laden with sorrow while others burst with hope, all mingling into a tapestry of experiences. Mabel's mind raced. What would they do with all this emotional raw material? How could they navigate the inevitable discomfort that unearthing such truths would provoke? Staring out, she contemplated the intricacies of human nature, the potential beauty that could emerge from confronting shadows. Suddenly, a sharp cough broke through the dialogue, and all heads turned towards the back of the room, where an elderly man stood, unwavering but visibly distraught. Mabel's stomach tightened as she recognized him. He had been quietly observing from the sidelines, channeling an intensity that spoke volumes. This wasn't merely a participation, it was a stake in their shared journey. "Can we really trust each other?" he asked, the question cutting through the charged atmosphere with precision. It was a query that paused time, forcing Mabel to confront the challenge head-on. Her heart raced, grappling with the implications of his doubt. As silence enveloped the room, Mabel felt it was time both for herself and for the group to draw a line in the sand. Leadership wasn't just about navigating challenges. It involved embracing the uncertainty together. With a deep breath, she stepped forward. "Trust isn't given. It's earned through our willingness to be vulnerable with one another. Let us take ownership of our stories and commit to authenticity." Yet, while these words surged with confidence, Mabel couldn't shake the thought that this was only a beginning, a revolution of heart within their community. As the air shifted around her, bringing forth hesitant agreement and lingering mistrust, she realized the depth of the task ahead. Could she foster this environment of openness and potential when the very foundation of trust rested on fragile ground? Would they rise above doubt or allow it to overshadow their aspirations? The shadows of uncertainty loomed larger, leaving her to contemplate not just the outcome awaiting them, but the pivotal role she would play. The time had come not just to confront vulnerability, but to lean into it and seize the potential it held. What transformative decisions awaited them? And as the atmosphere thickened, the urgency turning to unrest, would they all be ready to face what lay ahead together? Mabel's heart raced as a wave of uncertainty washed over the room, palpable yet enigmatic. The elderly man's question hung in the air like an unresolved chord, tugging at her own insecurities. She sensed a shift, a deeper need woven into the fabric of their gathering. What had begun as an exercise in vulnerability now demanded something more: clarity of purpose. "Let me ask you this," Mabel proposed, her voice gaining a steely edge. "What if we see our stories not just as pain, but as paths toward strength? Stories not merely of adversity, but of resilience?" Silence washed over the group again, punctuated only by a slight rustle of discomfort. Mabel felt the need to pivot quickly, to reclaim momentum, but the questions crowded her mind. How could she shepherd these people through that pain without losing them to the depths of despair? Glancing toward Maria, Mabel noticed a rising tension in her posture. She recognized it now, fear of delving too deep. "Perhaps we could start connecting the dots ourselves," Mabel suggested, setting her jaw with determination. "What if you wrote down your stories anonymously? A blank canvas where we can all paint our truths and share not just the shadows, but also the breakthroughs they led us to?" The idea seemed to electrify the room. Mabel caught a glimpse of light returning to Maria's eyes. A flicker of hope rekindled amid shadows. The elderly man shifted his weight but remained static, still wrestling with an internal battle. "Every one of you matters in this process," Mabel pressed on, feeling a growing confidence. "And together, we'll find the common threads that bind us, the ones that weave resilience into the fabric of our community." As they deliberated, Mabel's thoughts spiraled into self-reflection. Was this the leadership she envisioned, a guide through raw emotional terrain? The thought both exhilarated and terrified her. Each person had a story woven with their doubts, their victories, and she realized that her own journey mirrored this complexity more than she wanted to admit. Time blurred as Mabel began drafting her own written piece, half composed of thoughts and half filled with raw emotion. Each word became a reflection, a channel to clarify her uncertainties. "What am I truly after?" she questioned silently. And what does courage look like when standing amid doubt? When she opened her eyes to the group again, it was to a tapestry of expressions reflecting her own turmoil: fear, skepticism, yearning. She spoke while tightening her grip on her paper. "I'll share my story first," Mabel announced, a feather of hesitation caught in her throat but fluttering away as she forged ahead. "I struggled with trusting myself for years, believing that my voice was inconsequential. Yet it was only through sharing my fears that I discovered the power in authenticity." She recounted her experiences, a journey punctuated by obstacles, and saw recognition flicker in her audience. "We've all been there," she added, emboldened by the mingled glances of empathy and vulnerability. Each personal admission of resilience was a triumph rather than a defeat. Suddenly, the elderly man broke the quiet, leaning slightly forward. "That's wonderful, Mississippi. But what if we trust too much and end up betrayed?" It was a valid concern, one she knew she would have to address head-on. "That fear is real, and it may happen," she responded, testing her conviction. "But what impedes our growth is the fear of connection, not the potential for betrayal. We cultivate trust step by step, with every shared story knotted into the understanding that we're stronger together." The aged man's eyes softened, an acknowledgement of her perspective, though uncertainty flickered, an unspoken challenge hovering, just like the weight in her chest. Would they step through this labyrinth of vulnerability together, or would the very act of sharing become a fissure that could tear them apart? Mabel felt the impact of the moment, yet the horizon ahead shimmered with possibilities. "Let us take this leap, shall we?" she urged, glancing around and feeling their anticipation. "We may not be able to control the outcome, but we can embrace this journey into honesty." But as the tension settled, cradled by a fragile sense of unity, Mabel found herself pondering her own limits. Could she lead this group, shoulder their burdens, pushing past her trepidation? What would unfold if they succeeded or failed? A sense of impending challenge loomed, accompanied by a fraught uncertainty that gripped her anew. Could she navigate the next phase fraught with emotions, and would they remain intact by the end of it? In that moment, the door creaked open to new prospects, a threshold she had to cross. Just how deep would this journey go, and what revelations awaited? As dawn broke over the community, Mabel felt inexplicably transformed. It was as if the warm light filtering through her kitchen window nudged her into a new chapter. The previous day's fears and hesitations had ignited a spark within her, revealing a path that demanded not only leadership, but authenticity and vulnerability. Today, she would not just be a mother. She would be a beacon of change. Breakfast was a whirlwind of activity. Her son, Mario, was unusually animated, eager to discuss their plans. They enjoyed their morning routine, but a sharp realization struck Mabel. The time for mere discussions had passed. They needed to turn their words into actions. As they finished eating, her mind raced with possibilities. It was time to structure the collective voice of the community into tangible outcomes. Setting out, Mabel felt buoyed by resolve. They walked toward the local park, the very heart of their gathering place, which had recently become a focal point of her mission. It had a bitter history, marked by neglect and divided loyalties, yet it harbored the potential for solidarity. Each step seemed lighter than the last, pulsating with purpose as she and Mario entered a scene of gathering families and curious onlookers. By the time they reached the park, clusters of neighbors began to materialize, drawn by the promise of a community meeting. Mabel's pulse quickened. With each familiar face she spotted, she sensed a wealth of stories brimming to be unlocked. "Let us stretch the boundaries of what we can do," she declared as she called for attention. "Today, we will not dwell on division. We are here to invest in both trust and accountability." The eager crowd nodded tentatively, still riding the waves of skepticism. Mabel instinctively understood they had to earn their trust through actionable steps. Together, they started brainstorming. The conversation flowed easily, with inhabitants revealing their hopes for a revitalized neighborhood, cleanup efforts for the park, youth programs, conflict resolution workshops. Each suggestion brightened her spirit, solidifying the groundwork of a shared vision. But in the backdrop of progress lurked uncertainty. Thomas's skepticism often echoed in her mind. As she addressed the crowd, she took a leap of faith. "Let us form small groups to identify what needs to change first. Each of us has a piece of this puzzle, and together, We have the strength to create a beautiful picture. Mabel observed as people engaged, shedding their reluctance piece by piece. Conversations sparked as passion ignited. Each idea, though elementary, became a stepping stone to deeper connections, the very essence of community building. Before her stood conversations saturated with emotion, each story shedding light on shared struggles and unfulfilled dreams. She noticed Mario stepping in to listen closely to the concerns of neighborhood youths, those who often felt marginalized. His engagement filled her with pride, a direct reflection of the values they had fostered at home. As the groups convened across the park, Mabel firmly grasped the need for follow-through. Their success hinged not merely on dialogue, but on taking responsibility for the collective narrative. She made a point to emphasize that accountability would serve as both a sword and shield. In that moment, fears that once trailed her began to dissipate like the morning fog. Time seemed to stretch. She wanted to capture every detail of this newly formed sense of unity. The atmosphere around her pulsed with hope and the potential for healing, now standing in stark contrast to yesterday's palpable tension. They had started to weave threads of authenticity together. An intricate gathering of individual narratives gradually affirmed a greater whole. When a group emerged from their discussions, Mabel felt the weight of possibility in the air, a subtle shift as trust began to glue fractured relationships back together. With every story shared, the fabric of the community tightened. Together, they identified key issues. Suddenly, the collective power of a shared goal became tangible, a neighborhood campaign to clean and revitalize the park, restoring it as a safe space for families. The initial skepticism began to fade as ideas of collaboration transformed into actionable plans. Mabel felt a seismic shift. Vulnerability had birthed empowerment. With Mario by her side, she had begun to accomplish what had once felt insurmountable, turning uncertainty into a proactive pulse of community action. Later that evening, Mabel stood at her kitchen table, placing a new framed picture of her family beside her late husband's portrait, this time not as ghosts of the past, but as champions of change. She reflected on how far they had come, transforming doubt into a solid foundation for restorative relationships. Every choice she had made, every moment of vulnerability she had faced, paid dividends in newfound awareness. Mabel realized she wasn't just building bridges, she was fortifying connections. The weight of her previous fears had transformed into a solid confidence, born not from a title or position, but through genuine interaction and engagement. As nights settled gently around her, she couldn't help but smile. They had all claimed their rightful narratives, and through collaboration, they had conquered the storm that once loomed over them. Fear now had been replaced by a commitment to face tomorrow together. Mabel stood with renewed purpose. She had learned that true leadership thrives on trust, and together they had accomplished something profound. This community was poised to embrace not just change, but a new narrative filled with hope, resilience, and myriad possibilities. Ultimately, Mabel's evolution stretched beyond personal growth. She had nurtured the collective potential of her neighbors. A tremendous sense of fulfillment washed over her. She was no longer just an advocate. She had transformed into a catalyst for change, embodying the very fabric of leadership rooted in shared humanity. Now, it was not just her story, but theirs, woven profoundly into the future they were crafting together. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and support the channel. Comment your reactions and theories about this heartfelt conclusion. And share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this uplifting story. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share.